Yep, over the affairs of the province. Babylon had a lot of provinces, and they were placed amongst three separate provinces. These dudes were head honchos, and over them was Daniel. So when Daniel got promoted, he didn't just look out for his own interests, he also looked out for his boys. And he made sure he put them in places of position, not just because they came from the same place, and not just because they suffered under the same thing, right? But because they proved themselves excellent in spite of adversity, because Daniel was no fool. He knew that those men would reflect on him. No fool he was. And they reflected him well, even to the point of what happened with not bowing down to Nebuchadnezzar. Did you say something?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to back up just a little bit. There was something you said that was, I think it carried great weight when you mentioned that they valued what was inside of them, and to be so young, but to know how what you carry is worthy to be just taken, not to be taken for granted. And I don't know if you can maybe just speak to that a little bit more, because I think even as adults sometimes can be like swayed or persuaded into kind of going with the crowd, or maybe doing something that is not where your spirit or who you are as a person, where God is not leading you to kind of go down that route, but to know that what he placed inside of you is worth not to be taken for granted or to be taken advantage of in any way.
You know what? Just that's really good. Let me do it this way. Let me answer it this way, or speak to it this way, right? Do you know something Scott and I spoke about? Do you know what the difference between inoculation and vaccination is? We were just talking about this week. I love the story of how an inoculation came about, because it really has everything to do with what you're talking about at this point, right? So Louis Pasteur and Dr. Roux lived in France in the late 1800s. Black diphtheria going around, killing all these kids, and they had 100 kids in this hospital basically put there to die, because even nurses didn't want to take care of them, because the nurses would get it, and there was no cure for this. Okay, so black diphtheria killed everyone, as did smallpox. And the kids got it especially bad, and they were definitely purveyors of illness. Why am I saying this? Because they banished Dr. Roux and Louis Pasteur because they understood something called germ theory. Germ theory, they said there were these microscopic things we can't see that are killing us. And we have to give people that microscopic germ so that they can develop an immunity to it. What he said was heretical. And they kicked him out of Paris. But he went into hiding in the woods of Paris and set up his laboratory and started doing experiments. So Dr. Roux, his granddaughter died of black diphtheria, and he said he vowed to figure out what caused her death so that other grandfathers do not suffer the same heart pain that he went through. So they found these 20 magnificent horses, strong, healthy, vibrant, gorgeous horses, brought them to the forest, because you remember he's hiding out, right? And they took the black diphtheria that they had, it's very easy to develop it, just get it from a sick kid and spread it all over stuff and you got it. And they took a whole lot of this stuff and put it on their nose, put it on their ears, put it in their mouths, all the places that they're going to open up, because the thing likes wet, moist places, right? And they watched those 20 beautiful horses, and other doctors heard about it, and they knew that that Louis Pasteur and Dr. Roux were in the forest, and they came to watch. But every day those horses got sick. They developed a fever, and if you know anything about horses, if they lay down, they're really sick, right? And all 20 horses were laying down, and one by one, all of those horses died. The doctors left. They're like, please, we're just gonna see all those horses died. All the horses but one died. And not one magnificent horse. They said, hey, let us know when that fever breaks. The fever broke in that horse. The very next day, the horse got up and he started eating. And you know what they did to that horse? They killed it. And they took its blood and they ran to the hospital where those 100 kids were dying. They beat the guards up. The history book said they actually literally beat the guards up to get into the building, because remember that building's in quarantine now because they're not trying to have a spread, an epidemic of black diphtheria. And they go in and they forcefully inject some of the blood of the horse that overcame black diphtheria. And now the horse's blood is filled with all those germs from black diphtheria, and they took it and they inoculated every single child there, and 97 lived. 3 died. But these were kids at death's door that no one was no longer helping or feeding. And 97 kids lived by the blood of the overcoming horse. Right? Now, inoculation, you give the disease, and the person is forever inoculated or immunized against the disease. Right? Have you ever wondered why Daniel, it doesn't say that he had all these other friends. It was just Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Because like Daniel, they were inoculated with God's word. It went through everything for them. For them, they understood that my name change, there's a spiritual significance to that. And I refuse to allow that spirit of that Chaldean idolatrous name to fall upon me. My outward name may be that Chaldean thing, and I have to do that because I work in Chaldea, and I am a head of a province. But my heart remains to the God of my ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And no name change will change that for me. No change will make me decide that I'm going to leave the God of my youth. And no God that man has created has proven to be more powerful than my God. That belief infiltrated them through and through. It never talks about Daniel having any other friends who came with him, because believe me, there were a lot of other young nobles from Israel. But they didn't make the same decision Daniel and his friends made. They didn't. They were vaccinated. Like the way you get vaccinated with COVID, and you could still get COVID. So how thoroughly is that COVID vaccination going to work? Is if I got the 2 vaccinations and the 2 boosters that they requested, because did you know that the vaccinations can lose its effectiveness, and that's why you need a booster to remind your body how to fight COVID when you see it. See, I didn't get inoculated. Once I got inoculated with black diphtheria, my body will always recognize black diphtheria, and I will never get it. But you get vaccinated as a Christian, you get a little bit of theology, and then it makes you immunized against the truth of God's work in your life. Think about it. Right? And that's what happened to a lot of these kids who came. They had an understanding of godliness. They had an understanding of the God who loved them. They knew what Abraham and Isaac and Jacob did. They know what God did with Moses. They knew all of that. They knew what it was like to be a Hebrew under the God of the universe. They knew all that. They had the same stories that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had. The same story, the same history, the same upbringing. The same knowledge and education. They were all nobles. They all knew. But 4 chose rightly. Then the rest didn't. They were inoculated. They had God's word inoculated all through them. Nothing that came outside from them was going to change what was inside of them. Right? But the others were vaccinated. And Babylon got to them. And they acted just like the other ones who were not born of the Lord. So I hope that I hope that helps you there, right? Now, so I want you to think about that, right? Because I want you to really think. And this is the crux of what we're talking about. And in the last few minutes that we have, which I'm glad the timing works where it works, right? When we think about, we don't hear too much more about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after the fiery furnace, where the angel appeared to them as well. You know, they had their angelic moment where when they were in the fire, the Lord did something extraordinarily miraculous. So much that King Nebuchadnezzar was like, yo, this God in heaven, he's the God of heaven. We got to give him props, give him what he's due, right? Now, but we do know. Can somebody, did I give anybody Hebrews chapter 11, verse 34? Hebrews chapter 11, did I give any? Why you pointed to your mom? You don't have he's Hebrews 11. That's what he's like pointing at you. Yep, Hebrews chapter 11, Now, while she's getting it, let me just explain briefly. Hebrews chapter 11 is what people, theologians or whatever, people refer to as the Christian Hall of Fame. Right? Right? They talk about the heroes of old, the ones of whom the world was not worthy. Right? These would be people who stayed true to the faith. Some of them are named, some of them are not named. Right? And in Hebrews chapter 11, I don't know if you were able, I'm sorry? Yeah. I don't know who I gave. Did I give Hebrews chapter 11, verse 34 to somebody? I thought I did, but. Yeah, thank you. No, that's fine. Yeah, just whoever got, thank you, Pastor. So it's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 34. Now, this is really, really short, okay? So remember, they're just talking about of whom the world was not worthy. People who made that decision, even if it cost them their lives. These were people inoculated through and through with God's gospel, right? They didn't get a vaccine. This was all the way through, down to the marrow of their bones. Okay? And what does it say? It's a very brief thing.
You want me to start at 34?
Yeah, you know what? As a matter of fact, do 33 and then read all of 34. But they're going to see, I'll pull out the part that I want. Go ahead.
It says, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens.
Thank you. Did you get that? Who shut the mouths of the lions? And then what did verse 34 says? Quenched the power of fire. Right? A reference also to what happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in that fiery furnace. Right? And the angel was there and quenched that fire so that not even their clothes smelled singed. Right? Now, so we talked about these men. Now, what do we learn from them? Right? Because now that we've talked about all these things, this means nothing if we go away with no application. Right? So, what do we learn from them? What do we learn from Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Belteshazzar? And the friendship amongst the four. What can we take home with us? And there's no real right or wrong answer in this. Most answers would probably be fair game.
What I took away from it was just because you're in a place and people do certain things and there are people that may be above you does not mean you have to turn or change who you are and defile yourself and not, how can I say it, not be your true self because of the people that you are around. That's what I got out of it.
Anybody else?
And if you don't have the blood of the overcomer, then you're going to die.
That's right.
And Pastor, the church does not endorse or vaccination or non-vaccination or boosters or anything else. Is that right, Pastor?
It's just
a little
endorsing
disclaimer.
the blood of the overcomer.
That you would value. Oh, I apologize.
I thought my phone was okay.
But to value what the Lord has placed inside of you.
There you go. And something else. Think about this. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. And was there others? My bad.
I just felt like that
Okay.
what it truly means to believe, right? To have faith, regardless of what's coming into your face or what's in front of you, what you see, what the storm is like, what you're going through, how you feel. But if you truly believe, I'm still going to be disciplined enough to live this life that God has told me to live.
I want to go back to our first question, which was your friends and who you have around you. That means a whole lot. Your friendship. Oh, you're going to circle back with that? But I just think who you have in your circle matters. Who is feeding into you, the qualities that you have and what they have. I think it came back full circle.
Okay, so for me, what I've taken away from it is that I just lost my chain of thought, but I'll get it. That you have to have your own encounter. That's important. Because we can go around living off other people's stuff, but it's not the real thing. Having that encounter with God where it's personal, where I've proven him, I've seen him done it, I know he can. Having that is more important because yes, we can have the friends, but it's easy to be swayed by friends, right? But when I know that I know that I know that I know, I can't be swayed.
And I'd like to just point something out because you make a very good point. We know that Daniel goes through his trials by himself, right? The lion's den, and with the angel visiting him, that was its own kind of torture itself, right? So Daniel goes through his own thing. But we also know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went through what they went through without Daniel. But think about this. They were each one individually going through it and then brought together. Okay? Because they were the heads of provinces. They chose not to bow down separately, but they suffered together. Okay, so so their faith was their own. And I want you to think about this just because we're running out of time, right? So to have faith, to obey God in big trials, we need to prepare in advance by being obedient in lesser trials. So think about that, right? So those, God says it's step by step, reason by reason, right? So it's those everyday small decisions that help you. And it's not the big fights that tears up a marriage. It's the daily pulling apart, right? That destroys the fabric, right? So it's the same thing with this. It's those day-to-day small decisions to be obedient to God in these small matters so that when the big day of trial comes, you stand, right? And I also want you to think about this, that tests of faith often focus on resisting the world's influence. Right? We don't get tested on the things that we're comfortable in and what we know to be truth. Right? We get tested on those things that are going to come to try and force us to be and look like the world. Right? And who we choose as friends is potentially life-changing and vision-altering, and it can determine how we see God and our purpose in this world. So you see these things that I wrote here? Right? Image of God. Do you see God as a master or as a loving father? Right? What about for theology? Do you live by the love of law, or do you live by the law of love? Right? What about security? Are you insecure and lack peace, or do you rest in peace because of your Father? Right? Think about the need for approval. Right? Do you strive for man's approval, or are you seeing what it looks like to be totally accepted by God's love and justified by grace because you're seeing it in your friends? Right? What about motive behind Christian disciplines, right? Do you do what you do to earn God's favor because you have to check it off your list? Right? Or is it your pleasure and delight? Who are you walking with? One time I was talking to my daughter, and she says, well, how do I know that God is which guy God has for me? I said, honey, just run hard and fast after the Lord and see which guy keeps up with you. Think about it. Right? Because if you're running and they're keeping up with you, that means they're running with you. That means that they're running on their own. Right? You don't want no slow pick way back there. Oh, wait, or somebody who ain't even got to the starting line. Right? Come on now. What about self-image? Do you have self-rejection from comparing yourself to others? Or what about positive and affirm because you know you have value to God? Because you see that in your relationship with people, with your friends. Who speaks into your life? Who are those 5 people that you thought about at the beginning? What are their character attributes? Are they causing you to understand what your motives are behind your service, that you do it out of love and delight, or because you're checking off your box because that's what a good Christian does? Right? And then what about the view of authority, right? Do you look at it as a source of pain and distressful and paranoid and lack of a heart of submission? Or are you respectful and honoring, giving honor where honor is due, and seeing authority as ministers of God's grace and justice for you? Right? What are your friends telling you when they see an injustice? And what are you allowing go down into your heart? What are you saying when you see injustices and allowing to feed in others? Right? And what about handling others' faults, right? Accusation, and you expose them because you called them out and you showed them where they went wrong? Or love covers as you seek to restore them gently in a spirit of love and gentleness, right? Because we're quick to point them fingers for getting a phone that 3 more pointing back at us, right? Expression of love. Is our love conditional? Is it based on others' performance, or is it patient as you put down your own agenda to meet the needs of others, right? And so, in looking at your peer relationships, I was just trying to touch some of these as I wrote them down, right? Is there competition, rivalry, and jealous towards others' success and position, or their gifts and talents and abilities? Or is there humility and unity as you value others and that you're able to rejoice in their blessings and success? Right? I mean, because think about this. Ain't none of this shallow. This is deep. And it is so deep that it covers wide areas. Right? Because this, we need to look at the world through the lens of God's love for us individually. So I love what you said, Amira. It has to be our own, right? But it's not just our own because the Bible tells us not to give up meeting with one another. Right? And it's not just our own because God says, taste and see. And how blessed it is when the brethren dwell together in unity. Yes, Pastor?
Or you can overlook the little thing because, no, that's my friend. We've been together. And the whole time they telling you exactly who they are. And you miss it because you overlook it because they're your friend. This is a foundational lesson in your establishment of relationship. And it's important that you don't just say, oh, we had a good time, but that you take this lesson and you really put a litmus test to those people that she asked you about that you wrote down, those 5 people in your circle. It's really important that you test and see if they the 5 that you really think they are. Because it could be that you overlooking Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you replacing them with Shaquille, Michael, and that other, yeah. So I don't want us to miss this. I mean, it's good, but we don't want to say it's good and we don't go home and do the exercise. I challenge you. Go home and do the exercise that she just laid out. You wrote down the 5 people in your circle. Put them against this test and see if they really need to be the ones in your circle. Could be the reason you ain't where you want to be right now.